Tell me a fact and I'll learn. Tell me a truth and I'll believe. But tell me a story and it will live in my heart forever. The Names Not Numbers Oral History Film Documentary Project is remembering the stories of the Holocaust and is telling the story of the Holocaust for the world to hear, for the world to learn, and to inspire future generations to combat anti-Semitism and all forms of hatred and intolerance. The students were instructed by teachers and professionals. They learned interviewing techniques from journalists. They learned filming techniques and editing skills from documentary filmmakers. The students interviewed, filmed, and edited the 2-hour interviews with each survivor to make 20-minute oral histories that are compiled in the Names Not Numbers documentary at the school. You're about to view the documentary Names Not Numbers, a movie in the making. This film chronicles the students as they are being trained by the professionals and includes their reflections. In it is embedded approximately 10 minutes from each interview. This is the students' work, their filmed and edited interviews. Through this project, our students are preserving history, and they are the witnesses to the witnesses.
My grandparents stayed on because they didn't think it's going to be so bad. No one thought so.
They were trying to convince my parents to immigrate also. My father's mantra was always, Jews have never had it so good.
When the Nazis came in, immediately there was terror, there was fear.
Christian boys would point out to me, to the Germans, Jude.
All Jews have to be at the train station within 2 hours.
I was scared all the time.
You don't look for comfort. You look to survive.
We had nothing. Nobody was protecting us.
They had no coats, they had no socks, they had no gloves, and the Nazis knew that they would die quickly.
Of the 11 children of Hannah and Yosef Garnsash, only my family is the family that survives.
I can tell you that I lost 92 relatives to the Holocaust, 92.
All my life, all I ever wanted was my mommy back.
All right, good morning, everybody. We're here. Raise your hand if you've heard about Names Not Numbers, like for a few years. Okay, raise your hand if you have had a sibling, a neighbor, a cousin, someone who's done it before and you've heard about it ever since you were little. Raise your hand really high. Okay.
First heard about Names Not Numbers probably in like 4th grade, so 2019, 2020.
Probably when in like 5th grade when I started middle school. So I first came to this school in 6th grade, and I remember seeing all the 8th graders come to school one day all dressed up and fancy, and I asked one of my friends, what is this for? And she said, oh, it's this really cool thing called Names Not Numbers, and you're able to make a documentary about the Holocaust, which I thought was really special, especially to me because I'm the descendant of a Holocaust survivor.
Raise your hand if you are excited, looking forward to it. Raise your hand if you're nervous. Names Not Numbers is something that's really important in our community, and you've been hearing about it for a few years, and here we are at the beginning. This is you. You guys do this for the community. This is the beginning of what I can guarantee is going to be a life-changing experience for you. It might change you a little, it might change you a lot. You are going to play a really important role in telling someone's story, and that's unbelievably valuable to the Jewish community. You, throughout this process, are gonna be someone's story holder. You are gonna be the witness to their story. And you are one of the last ages, grades. There are some kids in Hillel Torah who are not gonna have the opportunity to interview a survivor because there just won't be any more.
It's a privilege that we still have like some survivors alive.
We as Jewish people should learn about our past.
Cause like soon, like the next grades are not gonna have that opportunity.
We want you to be a different person on the other side of this experience. We want you to learn new things, hear new things, and live your life in a different way. We want you to carry the Jewish story forward and think about what are you gonna do. Take this responsibility seriously. Take this opportunity. Do not take it lightly.
My name is Moshe Avital. I was born in a shtetl, a town called Bilke in eastern Czechoslovakia on July 18, 1928.
We watched a video about a survivor.
I thought it was a really powerful video for us to see, and it really showed what he felt and his experience throughout the Holocaust.
It was actually a really emotional video.
It was cool to see that him being interviewed, because it's going to be showing us what we're going to be doing in this project.
To do whatever he can to free me. In the middle of the night, somebody shook me.
It was very easy to connect to him and feel the emotions he felt.
"31% of all Americans believe that 2 million or fewer Jews were killed in the Holocaust. Among young Americans, 66% of them could not identify Auschwitz as a concentration camp or death camp. This is the last generation that has the privilege to hear the survivors' testimonies firsthand.
We're living through unprecedented types of times in terms of anti-Semitism and hatred, and they're showing themselves in new ways which we're not really used to.
It is also why you guys cannot take this program lightly, because you aren't doing it for yourself. You're doing it so that future generations can know and understand the horror of the Holocaust and why it can never happen again.
It's not just another school assignment. It is something that will stay with you for the rest of your life.
We know that each story is a world unto itself, and each of those worlds, each of those people deserves to be remembered and treasured and honored.
This project will change you. It will open your heart, deepen your understanding, and remind you how powerful one story can be. Treat it with care and respect, and I promise it will stay with you forever.
When you first meet your survivor, it's important to make them feel welcome, to make eye contact. That might sound kind of obvious. They're putting a lot of effort into it, and I know you're all putting a lot of effort into it. This is an important meeting, so treat it like an important meeting.
We let them talk, of course. We make eye contact, we smile, we be serious in times that we need to be.
Listen to what they have to say, don't interrupt them.
You never want to ask a yes or no question. Are you sad? Yeah. Never.
You need to ask full questions so you get a real answer and not a yes or no answer.
If you're talking to your survivor, you might not want to ask were you scared during this event? You can more ask what was going through your mind during this event?
Because then they don't elaborate on what happened, but if we ask more open questions, they could continue with the story.
When you're talking to these survivors, you're going to know where they grew up. You're going to be able to ask intelligent questions about the town they grew up in. It would be like an insult not to.
Imagine the interviewers of Dr. Moshe Avital getting ready for that interview, okay? Do you think that those interviewers, when they sat in front of him for that first time that they met him, and again, they only met him when he came to be interviewed, do you think that was the first time they had heard the term Auschwitz? The answer is absolutely not. You're going to be given a biography, and on that biography, you're going to have a brief sort of outline of what the person experienced in their life. All of those places are going to be researched by you so that you are knowledgeable and you know what to ask them.
they're coming and talking about something very painful. So we owe it to them, you owe it to them to be, really prepared.
Okay, so my name is Anna. This is our camera technique session. We're gonna, go over the setup here. We're gonna learn how to use this camera, how to use the headphones, like different stations that you guys are gonna be doing during the interview besides asking questions.
The camera session before the interview was fun. Like, we got to understand how to use cameras, and it kind of helped me understand how let's say the movies are filmed or something.
We have 3 cameras. I have 1 camera that you guys will be operating, and then 2 cameras on the survivor.
I learned that you have to focus it. There's a close shot, a medium shot, long shot, and you have to wait till the red dots are on the body until it's perfect for the shot.
A medium shot will be waist and up of a person, right? The torso. And then a close-up shot will be their face, a little bit of the shoulders.
Our group came into a room, and then we were able to take turns holding, standing by the camera and seeing how to adjust it. And there was also a little part where you would put on headphones to make sure that the mics were working, and you could make sure all the sound was good.
It's just amazing to have this program where, we learn about so much, but then we also do so much with the editing and the cameras, and we get to be in on the action, and that's really exciting.
My great-grandmother went to Auschwitz, and later, after she came to America, she met my great-grandfather, who was also a survivor.
I had survivors in my family, but I never got to meet any of them because they all died before I was born.
My great-grandmother was a survivor. I know she was from Poland, and she survived Auschwitz.
My great-grandmother was also a survivor, but she passed away.
I do have survivors, but unfortunately, most of them have passed away.
On my mom's side, my grandfather, his 2 parents were survivors.
My great-grandfather on my mom's side.
I had a great-great-aunt who survived, but unfortunately passed away in 2018. Her daughter wrote a book about her in a documentary. It's called Salah's Gift and Letters to Salah.
I unfortunately did not get to meet my great-grandfather, but he was an amazing man from what I hear. I'm only here because he decided to make that choice to leave when he did.
I feel really excited, but I'm also a little bit nervous because, what if I, mess up a question or something?
I feel a little excited and a little scared.
I feel excited.
I'm excited and nervous at the same time because I'm excited to hear the story, but I'm nervous because it's a sad story and stuff.
I feel excited to hear about his story and just ready to hear it.
If he starts crying, I don't know how I'm gonna react to that or stuff like that.
I feel a little nervous, of course, because it's a big thing, but I also feel kind of happy that I'm able to get this experience and that I'm one of the last people to be able to hear from survivors who experience it themselves.
I'm excited, a little bit nervous. We spent a long time meeting with mentors. We wrote down the questions and we read her bio
and started to come up with questions in order to get her to talk about the full story from her perspective.
We practiced asking the questions together.
We practiced the questions and we got the gist of it, essentially.
I'm going to interview Rivka Wisnitzer.
I'm going to interview Miss Doris Lazarus.
Today I'm going to be interviewing Sipora Zoberman.
Today I'm interviewing Ann Kirshner, who also happens to be my great-aunt.
We're going to interview Agnes Schwartz.
Today we are going to interview Doris Lazarus, the daughter of Leah Mozak.
I'm going to interview Rivka Witzner.
We're going to interview Doris Lazarus. Today I'm going to interview Sipora Zoberman.
I'm going to interview Doris Lazarus.
I'm going to interview Rivka Wisnitzer.
I'm going to interview Ann Kirshner.
Today I'm going to interview Ann Kirshner, who is the daughter of Sala Garnsash Kirshner, who survived the Holocaust.
I'm going to interview Rivka Wisnitzer.
Agnes Schwartz. I'm very excited to be able to ask her questions.
Today I'm going to interview Ann Kirshner.
I'm going to be interviewing Isaac Daniel.
Agnes Schwartz.
I mean, I'm definitely scared, right? It's gonna be, you know, speaking to someone who like really went through the events, and excited at the same time.
I'm gonna interview Tzipora Zoberman, and I'm really, really excited because I'm close to the Dawa, and I know that it's a very special person to her, and I'm really excited to get to know her point of view and her personal story from her family.
My name is Isaac Daniel.
My name is Ann Kirshner. My mother was Sala Garnsash Kirshner.
I am Agnes Schwartz.
Doris Lazarus. My mother had two names. She was born Leah Kirschenbaum, but then she had to change her name to Lonia.
My name is Rivka Wisnitzer.
My name is Marguerite Mishkin.
Tzipora Zoberman.
I was born in Salonika or Thessaloniki, Greece, in 1933, the year Hitler came to power. My parents' name was father Mordechai Aaron Daniel. My mother is Bella Modiano Daniel. My father actually was a little bit of a cabinet maker. My mother was at home. My older brother is Aaron. I am number two, Yitzhak. My sister was Sarah. And my youngest brother is Shmuel. Shabbat was excellent. We went to the synagogue services, and then we came home, and we had a traditional Shabbat lunch, which is rice pudding and spinach pie. Our home was in a courtyard. One apartment was my grandparents lived there, my grandfather and my grandmother. Another apartment above was my Uncle Joseph. Uncle Joseph had a big family, my Uncle Joseph, 10 children. And they all survived, by the way. And they all went to Israel eventually.
My mother was born on March 5th, 1924, in Sosnowiec, Poland. She lived in a small village called Volbrum for a couple of years, and then her parents moved to Sosnowiec. She was the youngest of the 11 children. My grandfather, Yosef Garnsash, was a Hebrew school teacher. My grandmother, Hannah, she took care of the family. My mother lived there with 4 siblings and my grandmother and grandfather in a one-room apartment in a room a bit smaller than the one we're in now, with no running water. The bathroom was 4 stories down in the courtyard of the building. It was a very, very poor household. Sosnowiec was a city of about 100,000, and about 30,000 of the 100,000 were Jewish. So it was quite a significant Jewish population.
I was born in Budapest, Hungary in 1933. My mother was Margaret in Hungarian, and my father was Jenő, which would translate to Eugene. My father owned a business whereby he sold yard goods to tailors who made custom-made suits. And my mother worked along with him in the store. Oh, I was an only child, which was not unusual those days. I had one set of grandparents, my mother's parents, and they lived in a small town near Budapest, and I had a wonderful relationship with them, and I still miss them terribly. We spent summer vacations on beautiful Lake Balaton and winters in the mountains, the Kékes Mountains, where there was a lot of skiing and sports activity. I never wanted for anything before the war. I always had everything. Life was wonderful in Budapest before the war.
I was born July 21st, 1929, in Romania, in a region called Bukovina. Both parents were born in Romania. We lived in a lumber region, and he was a lumber merchant. He made a nice living. I had one brother younger than I am. His name was Asher Yaakov. We had a cow who gave us milk, a horse, we had chickens. Winter we used to sled, so that was a lot of fun in the winter, going sledding. Shabbat was beautiful. My mother used to get up very early and bake fresh challah. We always had chicken soup Friday night. Candles were lit, beautiful white tablecloths, fresh challah on the table. It was such a joyful day, such a joyful evening. We looked forward as kids to Shabbos always. We were not very wealthy people, but we had a very nice life.
I was born in Poland, Zamość. My father was Wolf, it's Zeph in Hebrew. My mother was Adela. They were born in Poland, Zamość. My father made a living. He was selling wheat flour. It was a very, very beautiful, nice Jewish community. The Jews were very happy, they were proud, they were religious.
I was born in Belgium in 1941, and then my name was not Mishkin, it was Lederman. My biological parents' name was Lederman. My father's name was Mordechai, and my mother's name was Wezel. And they had originally been born in Poland, but they had moved to Belgium. So they really might have thought it would be safer in Belgium. My father worked in leather, and my mother was a bookkeeper. I had an older sister. Her name was Annette. I wish I did have memories of my parents. That, to me, is one of my saddest things.
She was born July 20th, 1922. She was born in a city called Ciechanów in Poland. It was a medieval town. Jewish people had lived in Ciechanów since the 1500s. Her mother's name was Esther Kirschenbaum, and her father's name was Menachem Mendel Kirschenbaum. While my grandmother was at home raising the children, she was a homemaker, and my grandfather was an artist, but couldn't really support the family that way, so he used his talents to be a sign maker and to engrave monuments, headstones. There were about 6 children born before my mother who died of early childhood diseases because they didn't have the vaccinations and the medicine that we have today. So the surviving children were in order: Harry, then my mother, and then 2 younger brothers, Shaya and Shmuel. My mother came from an Orthodox family. Her father davened 3 times a day, and she told me that on Shabbat, after he came home from shul, they would have a dinner, which took her mother all day to prepare. Hashomer Hatzair was the Zionist organization. My mother did. Their motto was Chazak ve'ematz, be strong, have courage. This group taught them the courage, the bravery, and the leadership skills that they would need just a few years later to survive in the death camp of Auschwitz-Birkenau.
We have a big river, but Jewish kids could not dare go there. They would be chased away with stones and everything.
We were in public school, and we had Romanian teachers, and some were very anti-Semitic. The Jewish kids were not allowed to go to public school anymore. The Jewish community established a school for the Jewish children.
When she would go to school, children would throw stones at them. And there were signs in the town that said, Jews go to Palestine, Jews are communist, Jews are ruining the economy. And she lived with that hatred.
My mother had two sisters who lived in Chicago, who immigrated way before the war. They were trying to convince my parents to immigrate also. My father's mantra was always, Jews have never had it so good, and he's got a well-going family business, and they don't want to leave the rest of the family.
As soon as the Nazis invaded Poland, life changed dramatically. The schools were shut down. My grandfather became a prisoner of the apartment. Food became scarce. And my mother, who was always kind of an adventurous sort, the tomboy of the family, became the one who would go out and scout for bread or for food. She would run out on the street and go into a neighboring building and go out on the rooftops and run from building to building until she would go down another set of stairs and find her way to a bakery or to a neighbor's house and would bring home food for the family. And this went on for quite some time.
When Poland was invaded by the Nazis, there was a row of cars of Polish people that were fleeing Poland, and they had cars. Our town, no one had cars. We had a horse and buggy, and there was this whole line of cars throughout our little town, just passing through.
The Nazis invaded Zamość September 1939. When the Nazis attacked, bombing Zamość, people ran all over. My uncle Yehuda, he had a 13-year-old son and a 2-year-old son. When he came home, his wife and 2 sons were not there anymore. The Nazis took them and he never saw them again. My mother didn't know where I was. I was 8 months old. And she saw my aunt, my mother's younger sister, Dora, running toward her to show her that I'm alive with her. And my father saw what's going on. Thanks God that he had that vision. He said, whoever wants to come in with me, I'm leaving with my baby and my wife. He didn't even know about it, but he knew it looked like he has to leave Zamość. He didn't even know, but he went, I guess, to Russia, not knowing it was dark. The Soviet government caught us, they occupied us, and sent us to Siberia for punishment.
When the Nazis came in, immediately there was terror, there was fear. People were forced to leave their homes. Businesses were confiscated. Her life, her family, everything changed forever. They lived in fear of the future. They prayed for better days. All of the Jewish people were forced into the castle. My mother said that her mother couldn't run fast enough and fell, and they were beating her, but if my mother stopped to help her, they would have both been shot. My mother had already finished school. She was 17 when the Nazis invaded, but her mother, perhaps having some premonition, when my mother was 12, said, it's time to learn a trade. And so my mother became an apprentice for several years and then became a seamstress. Eventually, they were then forced into a ghetto. When they arrived in the ghetto, they were told they had 15 minutes to find somewhere to live and to get off the street. They ran into a horse stable, and that's where they lived, on the hay with the animals for the next year.
The first country that declared war on Greece was Mussolini from Italy. Germany invaded Greece. It was 1941. When they invaded, the first thing they did is arrested all the officers. Jews should not run stores and big stores and everything. And then a little later, you should wear the yellow star. We didn't mind it. We're proud. We heard all these things that they were deporting Jews from the big city of Salonika. Well, sooner or later, they're going to come to us, a little town. All my uncles started escaping, moving their families to the mountain villages. It was the last day of Passover. It was Tuesday, April 27, I believe. All of a sudden, 3 policemen came in front of the door of the synagogue. It was Greek policemen. You know, the Nazis, they didn't do the work by themselves because they don't know who's a Jew, who's not a Jew. They always ordered the local people to do all the dirty work. It was a little side door, a little door that went into the women's section. So I went through that door, and they came out through the door where the women would come from. And the police didn't know about that, so my father and my uncle left, but they left me behind. You know why? Because I had just learned how to read Hebrew, and I was in the middle of Amidah, and I said, I cannot interrupt the Amidah, I have to finish. So I stayed there all by myself, and my father and my uncle didn't know I wasn't with them. And he went home, and my mother panicked. He came to the synagogue. He pushed the policeman away. He grabbed me and took me home.
Maybe around 1942, my mom and dad started to realize that Jews had no future in Hungary, and we started our immigration process. And they packed all kinds of belongings in there that they wanted to ship up to America. We had all our papers in a row. Our luggage was already in Lisbon, Portugal, when all of a sudden the Germans wouldn't give us the visa to go through their country. And that's how I got caught up in the Holocaust.
My earliest memory was my mother, not my father, because my father was taken in 1942. What my earliest memory is the family that hid us. My sister and I were very, very fortunate. We were hidden by a family that loved us. Why did my mother decide to give my sister and me up? Obviously, she was very afraid that if we stayed with her, that we all might be murdered. The local priest, believe it or not, was in the resistance movement. And he went to, her name was Andrei Hershkowitz. My guess is that the priest said to her, you know, this mother came to me, she has 2 little girls that she would like to put into hiding. They had 3 kids, 2 boys in their early 20s, a girl about 16, I'm not 100% sure, I brought a picture of that. So they simply said we were relatives of the father. We were lucky, nobody betrayed us. There are cases where kids were betrayed, but we were not. But we went to Catholic nursery school, we went to Catholic church every Sunday. We really thought we were Catholic.
October 10th, 1941, we were deported. It was 11 o'clock, a Friday, Erev Shabbos, Chalamoid Sukkos. All Jews have to be at the train station within 2 hours with a suitcase. And if you have any valuables at home, you have to bring them to the bank and give them to them. You cannot take any valuables with you under penalty of you'll be shot. We left all the animals, and I was worried about the animals. Who's going to take care of the animals? And we went to the train station. There were cattle cars waiting there, and they put more people than it can take. There was no food, no drink. There was one container if you needed to use it to relieve yourself. We were on the train for probably a couple of days, yes.
My mother says, you and the two boys go to Mountain Village and then find some arrangement for us. Nobody knew what was happening. My father and my older brother and I started walking. We finally reached the river. The bridge was down. And there was a barge that the Germans were using. As we were approaching, a Greek peasant came running towards my father. My father, don't go to the barge, don't go to the thing. The Germans are there, like, checking papers, everybody. So we had to turn back. Then we finally reached home on foot. When we reached home, my mother was hysterical. Gee, if you were here 5 minutes ago, the police was checking every apartment, was checking everybody. But we stayed in the basement hiding. What do we do now? Any Jew caught hiding, to shoot them on the spot. We found a Greek Christian friend who agreed to pretend to be living there and do the shopping for us, bring us food and everything. But the new neighbors across the street, Christian neighbors, are still very anxious to get rid of us. So they even told the Greek police. The Greek police eventually, they came, they had no choice, they said. They came, they had to take us in. They took us straight to the German commander. The German says, why didn't you surrender like the others? And my mother said, well, I thought maybe because I was born Italian citizen, maybe that would save us. That doesn't count, because when you marry another citizen, you lose your citizenship. They put us in a jail cell, the size of a closet, no running water, no nothing, no place to sit down. They said, well, they're going to shoot you in the morning anyway. Well, morning came, and they didn't shoot us. They put us in a transit camp, and we're sitting there and waiting what's going to happen, waiting for the next train to Auschwitz.
In October 1940, so this is about a year after the Nazis invaded Sosnowiec, the Nazis set up an organization within the city of Sosnowiec that became the central organization for all the labor camps throughout Germany, Poland, all the occupied areas. And they put a Jewish puppet government in charge called the Judenrat, the Jewish provincial organization. They sent letters to certain homes saying that so-and-so in the family, Samantha in the family, you have to report to the train station. You're going to be taken to a labor camp. If you go, no one else in the family will be harmed and you will be paid. So this was the letter that came to my grandparents. And the letter came for Reisel, my mother's sister, not for my mother. Reisel was very bookish, very learned, extremely religious. And my mother immediately said, let Reisel stay home. I will go in Reisel's place. She was close to 16 at the time. The letter that came from the Judenrat, from the Jewish government, said that she'd be gone for 6 weeks. 6 weeks turned into 5 years. And at the train station, she had an encounter that really changed the rest of her life. The Nazis are screaming, everybody on the train. My mother, like a teenager, is like, I want to go. It's time to go, Mom, let me go. And then out of nowhere, this tall, well-dressed, clearly very well-educated woman walks up to them. And she's been observing the scene between my mother and my grandmother. And she says, my name is Alla Gerdner. I'm going to the same place. I will take care of her. And like that, my grandmother relaxes and lets Alla Gerdner pull my mother away from her, and off they go together to the camp. And that was a friendship that really, I believe, saved my mother's life in many ways, because when they got to the camp, Alla became her mentor, her big sister, told her to volunteer for whatever was available, helped her learn German. Alla was already fluent in German, and was the person who really got her acclimated as quickly as possible.
The first thing I remember is that we all had to wear a yellow star. Regardless how young you were, they had to be sewn on strong enough so you couldn't grab it and tear it off. When I graduated grammar school, which was after the 4th grade, already the Allies were bombing. I lived in a 3-story apartment buildings, and we were all used to running to the basement by that time, middle of the night. And this became such a routine. All the Jews were herded to live in a close proximity, which probably helped with the deportation. By this time, my parents had moved Grandma and Grandpa in with us because they heard of some atrocities in the outlying areas. So there was Grandma, Grandpa, Mom, and Dad, and I in one bedroom. There were 2 bedrooms, and the other bedroom had an elderly lady and her daughter.
We got to a town called Ataki. It was in Bessarabia. Today, this region is called Moldova. They made us get out of the train and go into houses. The windows were broken into, and on the walls, there was written with blood, so many people were killed here. Well, we knew we're not going to a good place, I guess. But I was only 12 years old. I mean, it was extremely scary. It was terrible. And they put us in a huge building, which was a military compound originally. And it was just terrible. Every morning, the soldiers came in with the whips and tried to make people get out, and they were trying to make them walk further into the Ukraine, deeper into the country, in the mud, cold, rain, old people who couldn't move. So my father, who was an amazing man, decided to bribe the guards that were watching, found an older Jewish couple that were willing to take us in. In the meantime, the soldiers used to run around and look for people that escaped. And my brother and I were hiding behind a bush that had no leaves. And the soldiers were looking, and they did not see us. To this day, I can't explain.
My father worked in a bakery that was assigned by the government. Everything was assigned by the government. It's all what the government told them. And you couldn't decide on your own. That's how Soviet Union was. Everybody was the same. You couldn't practice religion. He thought, he'll take home some flour because what they provide you wasn't enough, was a little. And they caught him. They caught him because he took some flour, the police. And there is no due process. no due process. And one policeman was holding him here, one here, and they were going to take him to jail, and that would be the end of him. He knew what's going on, and he was street smart. It was dark, no lights though. He maneuvered himself out of the sleeves, and he ran away. They were holding the sleeves and walking. They didn't know that he's not there anymore. He went home.
When I lived with the Francis, I talked Flemish. Flemish is a combination of Dutch and German. They were in that part of Belgium, in this very small community called Rumst, R-U-M-S-T. And it's actually close to Mechelen. And the reason I say that is because Mechelen was a transport, I think that's how you call it, or a transit cab. First of all, I remember how much they loved us. They had dogs. Maybe that's why I love dogs or something. They had a barn. We went to Catholic church every Sunday. We really thought we were Catholic. And also, we thought they were our parents. I really thought the Franks were my parents. Mm-hmm. I'd been with them certainly longer than I had been with my mother. I'm not even sure I knew I was Jewish.
Well, in the horse stable, their daily lives became an effort to try to stay clean. The people were slowly being starved. They were being frozen. They died of frostbite. They were forced into slave labor. My mother contracted typhus, which is a disease carried in unsanitary conditions by the lice. It is a deadly disease and often fatal. My mother was put in a room with no beds, with nothing. She received no medical treatment. She was crawling on the floor with a fever over 105, trying to just find a little water to put a rag on her head. Miraculously, she survived. Her uncle, Benjamin, was very, very sick in the ghetto and needed medical attention. And somehow he was able to escape from the ghetto at night. And he went back to Chechanov, where his brother Aaron and daughter Rivka were hiding. Somebody witnessed their reunion and reported them to the Gestapo. Benjamin, Aaron, and Rivka and the other people they were hiding with were arrested. They were interrogated and they were tortured. Adolf Eichmann escalated their orders. He wanted to make an example of them. And so he ordered them to be executed by hanging.
We were totally oblivious of what was happening. You know what our fun was? Have races with baby buggies. There were lots of abandoned baby strollers. When we went to the camp, we said, my mother was, Italian citizen. Italian citizens were exempted. It doesn't count so long as you married a Greek citizen. It's all gone. We appealed to the Italians. So my mother sent a telegram to the Italian consul, and the Italian consul couldn't do much. He asked the Italian ambassador in Athens, says, what should I do with these Jews? They want some help. He says, I know it's difficult. However, I will send a letter to Rome, to the governor Mussolini, to see what can we do. And he sent a telegram, a letter to Mussolini. Then he sent a letter back to the Italian consul in Salonika. He says, you are asking me about these Jewish women who were born Italian citizens, but they were married Greek citizens. Can we recognize them? Absolutely not. However, I think we need to investigate further. So in the meantime, see if you can get them out of this camp. They went to Italian consulate. They went to the basement. They opened all filing cabinets, blah, blah, blah. And then they discovered my mother's birth certificate. So a few days later, they came, you too can come out. So my mother, my brothers, my two brothers, and I came out. My father, they had to stay behind. A few days later, they convinced the Germans to let this man out. My father and the other men were granted temporary Italian citizenship.
She was sent to Geppersdorf. Geppersdorf was a camp where they were building the highway that would connect Germany to Poland. And then they deported a smaller number of women to work in the kitchen, to sew, to work in the office, to type, to work for the officers. And she eventually was in 7 different camps. Conditions in the labor camps were not like they were in the killing camps. They were there to be worked. They were not well fed, they were beaten, you were not supposed to have any personal items on you, but they were not, they were there to work, and so they could work them to death, but they wanted their labor very much. In the first camp in Geppersdorf, the Nazis were looking for someone to sew. And Allah had counseled my mother, whatever it is, volunteer for it. But as it turns out, my mother actually was a very skilled seamstress because one of her sisters was a seamstress in that one-room apartment. They actually had a Singer sewing machine that her sister operated. So my mother knew very well how to sew on a machine and also by hand. The Nazis did not have a sewing machine at the camp, and so my mother was sent to the home of a nearby tailor and his wife and their daughter, and she sewed there for several months. They also were part of my mother's story of survival. They had no idea why this woman, was not with her family, but they fed her, they clothed her, they sent money home to my mother's family. They sent a doll home to my mother's little niece. And when my mother eventually was no longer able to go to their home because the camp got its own sewing machine, they came to visit my mother in the camp. And many, many, many decades later, I found this family, and we are still very much in touch.
Hungarian Arrow Cross. They marched into the building and with guns drawn, and there was a shot that went into the air, and they ordered men between 18 and 45, work-engaged men, to line up downstairs. They tried to tell people in the building that they're going to bring these men back, they're just taking them to work. And that kept the rest of us quiet. He was on a train. He had no idea where it was heading. I'm sure it was heading for Auschwitz. And a couple of officers needed directions to Budapest. And that was my father's lucky day because he spoke a fluent German, and he became their guide. And when they got to Budapest, they let him go. And he came home to us. And by that time, they had taken my mother away. And my dad said, I'm going to go after her. And I tugged at his jacket and said, Daddy, don't leave me, Mommy's gone. And even my mother's mother, my grandma, said, there's no point in you going, there's nothing you can do for her. And so my dad stayed put. And my mother ended up in the Bergen-Belsen concentration camp. I was 11 years old when I last saw my mom. All my life, all I ever wanted was my mommy back.
My father found another place, and we went to another place. We stayed there. People only had a little house. The house had 3 rooms, and there was a family, but they took us in. People were dying of hunger, froze to death, or had typhus. My mother caught typhus, and she was taken to a hospital, and 2 weeks later she died. When my mother died, I became an adult. It was the most painful thing, the most tragic thing of my life. They established a ghetto in Mogilov Podolsk, so we could not go out of the ghetto. We were not given any food or drink or anything. Everyone had to fend for themselves. You know, horse and buggies go by full of dead people. They were frozen to death or they were just dead. Everybody had lice. Hygienic conditions were very bad. The things my father did for us, he always found something to buy and sell, and we always had something to eat.
People I stayed with, the Francis, owned a cafe. German soldiers used to come there. So my sister and I would go to the cafe. I was the favorite of one of these German soldiers. He'd sit me on his lap, and he would let me play with the insignia on his uniform and bring me chocolate, which during the war is like $10 million today. And he would also bring me little toys. You have to be really sick not to like the person. So I really liked him a lot. And of course, he liked me. But he would say, as I'm sitting on his lap, he would say that he could smell a Jew 10 miles away. So what I like to say is he couldn't smell close up.
They sent us to Uzbekistan. There was a different climate, it was a warm climate. My mother's younger sister, Dvora, she and her husband were in charge of that orphanage. And she and her husband had in Tashkent an orphanage home where the Americans supported it after they found, they sent clothes to the children. And she was there, she was very liked. She died 6 months before the liberation, not of hunger, no one killed her, but she got a kidney infection, and they had the doctors, but they didn't have the penicillin to give her, and she died of the infection at age 26. And I do remember her funeral with all the orphans that they marched to her funeral. I didn't know yet, either they didn't want to tell me those days, they didn't want to tell kids. And I remembered my mother and everybody came back from the funeral crying. And I said, what's happening? Where is Auntie Dvora? And my mother never really got over it. My daughter is named after her.
The Nazis said, tomorrow morning, everybody gather early. We're taking you out of here. But then they were pushed onto the boxcars, trains that were never meant to hold people or anything living. It was a small compartment and 120 people were pushed in. The mothers were letting the babies lick the sweat from their bodies just to hydrate them, to give them one more day of life. She was transported to the death camp of Auschwitz-Birkenau. She saw that 2 lines were forming. She was pushed into one line. She said at that moment, she understood she had just become an orphan and a slave. They were all forced to completely undress and pass before guards who sat at a table and took a look at you. And then they took her arm and they used a lamp to heat a needle. They dipped the needle into ink and then they branded her. It was very painful, with 5 large blue numbers. Her number was 25702.
There were a few hundred of us. The German told the Italians, well, if you want them out, we cannot keep them in this German zone. You have to take them to the Italian zone. So the Italian says, okay, we'll take you to Athens. Can you give us a train? Asked the Germans, to take these people to Athens. Sorry, we cannot spare the train. In the meantime, they told them, if they don't leave by the August 15, we'll arrest them all, send them to Auschwitz. So here we're first against a deadline and we have no way of getting to Athens. So the Italians imported train cars, first-class train cars from Italy. Finally, the deadline came and the Germans agreed to give us, to loan us the engine to pull the train out. We're given a go-ahead to leave. But when we got to Athens, the Italians received us well and they put us up temporarily in a school. However, my father says, well, stay in the school. I don't think it's safe to stay for too long. Let's get out. We went out. We rented an apartment in a nearby suburb. A few weeks later, Italy surrendered. So Mussolini was gone. But now, Italians were not allies with the Germans anymore. They put an announcement in the newspaper. All Jews in Athens come and register in the Jewish community. Failure to register will be punished by shooting, by execution.
As time went on, my mother was moved to many different camps and eventually ended up in a camp that was only women. And those women became like sisters. Some of them had been deported together from 1940, so they'd known each other now in the camps for 5 years. These relationships were emotional, the emotional fuel that kept her alive. So over the course of 3 days in July 1943, there was a massive selection of the remaining Jews in Sosnowiec. And that's when Reisel and Blima, my mother's 2 sisters, were sent to a labor camp. And my grandparents and those family members who had children were sent to a holding area and then to Auschwitz, where they were killed within 24 hours of their arrival. That was the last time that they saw their parents.
Julia took me away in the meantime, and I didn't know where my father survived the Nazi occupation until after the war. And she risked her life in order to save mine. And we got on the streetcar and we headed for her house. Moved in with her, and we told the neighbors that my parents lived in eastern Hungary. The Russians were occupying that territory already. My father survived in a Swedish protected home. There was a Swedish diplomat by the name of Raoul Wallenberg who was commissioned to buy up many apartment buildings and let the Jews move in there. And then they told the Nazis that this was a Swedish protected building. My grandmother was ushered into the ghetto. It was bad enough that there was no food there, but the Hungarian Nazis, the Arrow Cross, wanted to kill all the Jews possible. And they came at night and they marched a bunch of people down to the shores of the Danube, and they wired them together. And with one gunshot, they all sank to the bottom of the icy Danube. And my grandma was among them.
One morning, I was still asleep. It was 5 a.m., and I hear bang, bang on the door. I opened the door. There were 4 agents who claimed to be the Gestapo, but they were all Greek-speaking. Says, okay, enough is enough. Let's go to the camp. And the camp to be deported to Auschwitz. So one of them stayed with us, pointing a gun. While this guy was sitting there and talking to us, I said, well, I feel sorry for the children, he says, but what can I do? I have to follow orders. Yeah, but there's a way out. What's the way out? If you tell us the truth, maybe we can find a way out. The truth was 150 gold coins worth close to $100,000 today. And they left. As soon as they left, my father and my uncle got together. I don't think we can stay here any further. We found another place in the suburb of Athens, an unfinished house. One the basement had two rooms in the basement. And we had Christian names, so nobody would know.
How did your father avoid deportation to a German labor camp?
And they were coming into the homes of the people when they were retreating. But they didn't know we were Jewish because we spoke German. When the Russians occupied Mogilov, the first thing they did is took all the men to the Russian army. He found some Ukrainian guy with a little boat that crossed him to the other side of the Dniester. And on the other side, he got a Russian truck to take him to the town where we had relatives in Romania. My brother and me were left behind with my future stepmother. And a week later, my father sent a Russian, was he a sergeant or I don't know what he was, with a truck, came to us. And he promised him a watch. So he told him, if you bring my children back, I'll give you a watch. And that was on May the 6th, 1944. And the guy that took us had a truck with potatoes that he was bringing for the army. So the guy that took us in the truck hid us under the potatoes, put blankets on top, and 7 Russian soldiers sat on the blankets. So we stayed in that town where my aunt was, May 6th until December, when they liberated our town.
My mother, I always say she's the saddest person in my story because she was taken on the very last transport from Belgium. I cannot, when you think about it, a day later she would have been okay. Unlike my father, where we have an exact date of death, of murder, she was murdered sometime in December of 1944. And the Soviet liberated Auschwitz in January of 1945. He was taken in 1942. He was murdered there less than a month that he was in Auschwitz. He was murdered, if I'm not mistaken, on November 28th.
My mother immediately formed a small family of what is called camp sisters. And they helped each other. Even when she was starving herself, she always shared her bread, and she always put others' needs in front of her. She was in Auschwitz for almost 2.5 years, and you should know that the survival rate was about 30 days. My mother, along with 60 others, was forced onto what is known as the Death March. It was the coldest winter ever recorded in Polish history. They had no coats, they had no socks, they had no gloves, and the Nazis knew that they would die quickly. They were forced to run, not walk. If you paused to catch your breath, you were attacked by the dogs or shot by the guards. She had been taken while on the death march to several more camps located right near the German border.
A few days before the end of the war, they noticed that suddenly all the Nazi guards had fled and they were alone in the camp. A day or so later, the Russian army came into the camp that my mother was in. Russians found some of the German guards who had escaped into the woods, and they brought them before the women. They gave the women guns. They put the guards up against the wall, and they said to the women, "Kill them all." And one by one, the women put down the guns, and they said, "The time for killing is over. You do what you need to do for prisoners of war. That's not on us."
It was October 1944. We were hiding in this woman's house in the suburb, and then we heard the British would come, and we heard that the swastika flag from the Acropolis was taken down and replaced by the Greek flag. And then the British came in.
I was playing outside Julia's apartment when I glanced over and saw my father walking up Julia's steps, and I flew into his arms, and it was wonderful. I was in seventh heaven. I was liberated in January 45, and the rest of Budapest was liberated shortly thereafter.
We were liberated by the Russian army sometime in 1944, I don't remember whether it was March or April.
First of all, most of the people who were hidden children that I know remember liberation. I don't. So depending when it ended, I could have been 4.5. So maybe that's why I don't remember, but anyway, so I don't remember liberation. And for me and my sister, life went on as usual. My mother had told them that if she did not come back, she wanted them to adopt us, but had not put it in writing. I was taken from the only people I thought were my parents. They saved my life. My sister and I ended up in an orphanage. To go to an orphanage, that's like the worst of the worst.
The war ended in 1945. I was 2 years old.
When the war ended, she was 23. One day, the guards were gone, and the Russians said, "You are free."
This project is one of the most meaningful projects you're ever going to do in your life.
We had a session with Rabbi Liebtag.
Rabbi Liebtag taught us about Emunah.
And it was very powerful.
Emunah is the gap, okay, between what I know and what I am not allowed to know. If I knew God's plan, why would that be a problem? If I knew all of God's plan,
You wouldn't have free will.
I would be like God. Emunah is that I have to believe that there are certain things that I can't know.
And he told us stories about different survivors.
This is a picture of the Piazetzner Rebbe. The Piazetzner Rebbe was known as the Eish Kodesh. He ended up in Warsaw in the beginning of the war, then eventually in Auschwitz, He was an amazing person. In a matter of 1 month, he lost his child, his wife, his mother, and his mother-in-law. However, he determined that he's going to teach Torah, and he gives speeches in the middle of Auschwitz. He took those drashos, he wrote them down, he buried them in the ground. He died in about 1942, and they found these speeches afterwards. Here he says that even though we have faith in God, there are times, however, when we are smitten. That means we have very bad things. Here it was, they're sitting in the middle of Auschwitz. We have no school, we have no cheder, that's a schoolroom. We have no yeshiva, we have no synagogue to daven. We have no mikvah, we have nothing. And they're questioning God. We believe in you, Hashem, but just allow us to daven to you and to, it's hard sometimes. But that doesn't mean that you don't believe in God.
Hashem is always there, even if you don't think he is, and he will always do what's right, even during the hard times.
He taught us that whatever is happening, that Hashem's always with us, and he always has a plan, so even if you feel like it's the end of the world, like, just have emunah.
Be inspired by the strength, the courage, and the resilience of our survivors.
Learn from the past, be hopeful for the future.
Continue to learn about the Holocaust and to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Listen to what people have to say because they all have a story and you can always learn more from them.
Don't be afraid to speak out for the Jewish people.
Stand pat in your beliefs and your things, and then don't accept anti-Semitism from anybody.
There are always going to be people in the world who don't like us and who don't accept us for who we are.
It's such a gift to know that you're a Jew, show that you're proud.
Keep on being proud of who we are, being Jewish.
Don't buy everything you hear. Get your own knowledge.
We should be kind, not judgmental. Try to help people when you can.
My mother's message was always not to hate, not to kill, to see things from other people's perspective.
Just be nice to people. There's no reason to go around blaming people for things they didn't do.
Do what you think is right.
Look at the good things that you have and appreciate.
Stay grateful. Like, be grateful for what you have. People don't realize how blessed they are.
Never be silent when you see someone being oppressed or bullied, because it does not help the person. If you're silent, it helps the bully.
I will quote my mother of blessed memory. Just remember, you never know how strong you are until being strong is the only choice you have.
I'm glad that I was able to impart some of my experiences to you and show you that you can come out of such a situation and keep going.
How does it feel to be interviewed by your great-granddaughter who is named after your mother?
It's almost, I feel I'm dreaming. It's a dream.
Hashem Arabu Zorai Rabim Kamim Olai Rabim Oimri Meli Nafshi in Yeshua so in Yeshua Salai Velikim Hashem In Yeshua Salai Velikim Viata Hashem Magain Bodi Kidvaidi Umirim Roi Shikali El Hashem Mekra Vianeini May Harkat Shaisela In Yeshua, so, lo yivin